Welcome back. You're still tuned into News and Views on myself, Salailo Makudi. The time is 9:45 Central African time. And we're going to be wrapping up today's edition of the show with our Head on Air feature. There was a really wonderful conversation that Inaid Wadi had last night where he was talking about American politics and how there seems to be a shift when it comes to who gets nominated now in these positions of power. And he had a really, really wonderful panel. He had Nadia B, Ahmad, and was also joined by El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan from Washington, D.C. So it was a really wonderful insight on what's happening in America, the politics in America, and how there seems to be a shift in the face of who Americans want to be as their representatives. So if you missed that conversation, there it is. I'll be back with you again next week, Tuesday, for yet another edition of the show. Bye for now.
Well, what you're seeing is, and I think it's not just since Donald Trump took office. It was, it started during the Biden administration. So I think we should be clear about that. But the story of U.S. imperialism is a long story. I mean, the U.S. just celebrated 250 years of its founding, but really it was centuries of enslavement, land theft, and then you also have quite a bit of like moral depravity that has happened as a result of the genocide in Gaza. And really, it's not just the moral bankruptcy; it's also the financial bankruptcy that's resulted as from this. And so, I think if you really want to look at the line that Brother Moria talked about, is that you have where Dr. El Sayed mentioned about how people aren't able to afford money for groceries, and that's because gas is right now $5 a gallon. They also don't have money for rent or healthcare, and so when we send our tax dollars abroad, that really adds an insult, a higher level of insult to this injury. And so just bringing this argument, this is where Mamdani had done a strong work on. This is really about how the household budget is really not able to also have a foreign policy coat. And so this contact that is happening with voters, where you have high velocity engagement, and that is what has led to changes within the electorate. And also, I think when people are stressed, it leads to changes within the system. One of the resolutions we had passed at the DNC this past weekend was for the Leahy laws, which actually condition foreign aid based on compliance with human rights. The Leahy laws are a legal instrument, and so for being able to spend money abroad for war was not something that's very persuasive. And I think another thing to also note is that in this fiscal year of 2026, defense spending has hit over $1 trillion in the United States, and that's against $919 trillion in 2025. And right now, the request for the 2027 is $1.5 trillion, which would be a 44% increase. And so this is really where the rejection is happening, is on these numbers, because which if we're looking at what's happening with the war against Gaza, but also seeing what's this bottleneck with energy prices and the stranded oil assets in the Strait of Hormuz, you're seeing how this is also leading up to higher spikes in energy, as well as other costs associated with it.
Yes, Dr. Nadia. But also, Al-Hajj, when one looks at the American political landscape in terms of challenging traditional party establishments or the hierarchy, and I think what even Abdul Al-Sayed has actually proven that, this can be challenged because at the end of the day, it is about grassroots populism that seems to be growing in the United States of America. And once again, I think even Zohran Mamdani had actually proven this as well. It is not about traditional politics anymore. It is not about funding, like Dr. Nadia mentioned. I think 60 or 70 million was used in the when Abdul Al-Sayed had contested the elections as well. So what I'm saying is, all of this, there seems to be cracks, but also at the same time, a major shift once again in terms of how Americans themselves are actually seeing their own country and seeing their own government and their own politicians.
Indeed. I mean, you can only flim-flam a nation of people for so long. And what we've had with this administration are these repeated sleight of hands, this desire to put one over the eyes of the people, to make the people believe that what they're experiencing is not as bad as what they're experiencing. And I mean, you can only get away with that for so long. We've had 250 years of imperial contradictions. And those contradictions during this administration of Donald Trump are coming to a head. They're coming to a head. People are fed up. People, understand that what we've been sold as democracy has been largely a farce. The few have had too much control for far too long. And alhamdulillah, there is a disturbance among we the people that has begun to express itself, and to express itself in a way that is, for me, it opens the way for a lot of optimism. And this, for me, it began with what we witnessed during the middle of the winter in one of the coldest parts of the country, when ICE was doing what it was doing in Minnesota, and you had the thousands of people. These were not black people. These were not Somali people. These were not African Americans. For the most part, these were white neighbors that were coming to the aid of their Somali neighbors and their Latino neighbors that were being targeted by ICE in very vicious ways, and a number of them were getting their lives taken as a result. I mean, but they were in the streets. They were demonstrating the fact that, the people have the capacity to show up and to make a difference. And this opened the way for me to feel a tremendous amount of optimism. Again, that a very dramatic change was on the horizon for the United States, and we need this, and it's not been restricted. The opposition to ICE has not been restricted to Minnesota. We've seen it all over the country, and it's a beautiful thing. As difficult as it is to see at times, as painful as it is to see. Lives taken, people imprisoned, wrongfully imprisoned. The significant number of folk who have lost their lives in ICE custody, the people who have been deported unjustifiably, the people that have had their TPS, their temporary protective status, taken away from them unjustly. What we've been witnessing in America during this administration, what I consider to be the worst administration in my lifetime. The most destructive, the most terroristic government administration in my lifetime has opened the way for people across the board, even within the MAGA cult. There's been these rifts within the MAGA cult, people demanding change for the better, and so. I'm feeling optimistic amidst all of this turbulence, all of the painful stuff that we're witnessing every day. I'm feeling optimistic. There's a silver lining to all of what we're seeing.
Yes, El-Hajj Mauri. Dr. Nadia, just looking at people like Abdul Al-Sayed, Zohran Mamdani, and also Ilhan Omar in challenging the status quo and the appeal that they have to the electorate, to the voters. What is it about these personalities and also in terms of their leadership, their political style, that actually appeal to ordinary people on the ground to gain the level of support that they have and also winning?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question because I think what they were able to do is bring a political response to the legal arguments that were brought forward by South Africa in the international courts. And so I think the reason why the language of genocide is being used and is also controversial in the United States is because before it was a specific term, but because of South Africa, it was able to have a docket, like a legal meaning. And so I think because the case is alive and is going through the court process, South Africa has really been able to, I think, lay out for the United States as well as other countries what the legal standard is. And so I think that there's specific like jurisdictional burdens that are also being put forward. But to go to your question about what is the appeal of these certain progressive candidates, I think it's really a very, very simple messaging and also putting forward about the affordability crisis that's happening in the United States right now and across the world, and also seeing how the difficulty of paying at the grocery store is also related to having settlements in Israel, settlements in Gaza by Israelis, and also because of the arms, munitions, and military fuel, and all these items that have to be paid as a result of these military excursions. And so the real appeal, I think, is also because of young people. Young people have really energized the electorate, and the reason why the Democrats lost in 2024 was not just because of Gaza, but because they lost their organizing capacity, because so many young people were out in the streets protesting, participating in encampments on college campuses across the country. And so now that has shifted into political power, into being able to use that political leverage. And I think that's something that is harder to fight than a protest.
Well, certainly. And also, I think, Dr. Nadia, while you're saying, and just in the same breath, in terms of the messaging that has come through, and one has seen the response of Donald Trump, and, particularly with regard to Abdul Al-Sayed and Zohran Mamdani as well, in terms of Palestine and talking about, insults and accusing, using the anti-Semitism card, playing that anti-Semitism card very, very prominently as well, where he spoke about Abdul Al-Sayed hating Jews, hating Israel. He used certain derogatory terms against him and also against Mamdani. So it just, and as you said, people came out in their thousands in the streets throughout this entire genocide as well, which was, we've seen that right across the entire world, and not only in the United States of America, but it still does appear that this is a major issue for somebody like Donald Trump to play that anti-Semitism card.
Yeah, I think that's really true, and the reason why it's really important to look at the messaging behind this is not only did you have Mamdani win, you also had in the next election that followed his cycle a very big surge as well. And so, for example, in Harlem and West Bronx, which is New York's 13th congressional district, you had Daria-Liza Avila Chevalier, and she was she was really it was really a storybook finish in terms of what happened with her, because she was essentially a protester, somebody who was sitting through the encampments, and so she launched her campaign by asking why her congressman wouldn't actually would be voting to spend billions to bombs while people in their district weren't able to afford rent or pay for groceries. And she was only 32 years old, and she ran against a 5-term incumbent who also was a chair of the Hispanic caucus, and she won. And so in 6 weeks after her win, Dr. Abdul won the Michigan Senate primary. And this was against, as you mentioned earlier, $60 million that had been spent in outside money. And $30 million of that came from AIPAC. And then last night we saw Angie Nixon win the Florida Senate primary by 12 points, and he had actually outraised her 16-1. So not only have they been throwing money, but they've been really using as much power. And so this model that worked in New York has also worked in multiple states also. And so they've been really using that same argument and just hitting it home again and again. And that's really that the American people do not have money for healthcare, and that money is still able to be found in the trillions for the Pentagon. And so voters are not confused. There's nothing confusing about that for voters, that they can do the math.
Indeed, we are living in very revealing and challenging times. Trump's argumentation in the public square often is a manifestation of an exhausted mind. I mean, it's an exhausted mind. He is a someone who unfortunately has been placed in one of the most powerful positions in the world, unjustifiably. And his misplacement in this position has opened the way for, all that we've been witnessing since he's been back in office. I mean, the first go round was bad enough, but his return to the presidency has just been off the charts in terms of what he has been willing to say and do. And unfortunately, what the administration under his leadership has been willing to say and do. I mean, we are in very, very dangerous times. But I am guardedly optimistic because of the kind of pushback that we've been seeing from we the people on so many fronts. Today's focus has been on, for the most part, on politics, on the political shift that we're seeing, and it goes way beyond Mamdani and Dr.